everybody, Karibu tena and welcome back to my nursing channel. Today's video is going to focus on how to study better in nursing school. So I know that this is something that's been requested before and something I searched all the time when I was in school was how to study better, how to ace certain classes and certain exams. So this is going to be more of a generalized how to study video. If you guys want videos on how to study specific nursing classes, please drop that request down in the comments below. Make sure you tell me what kind of nursing class you want me to cover. So today is just going to be a generalized how to study and the tips and tricks that I found most helpful and want to pass on to you guys. Just a disclaimer, it doesn't matter what type of grades you're getting in nursing school as long as you're understanding the knowledge and feel comfortable taking that forward with you. So you can have C's and still get a nursing degree. C's get degrees. And it's funny because I've heard a lot of patients and people say, well, I don't want a nurse who had all C's in nursing school or didn't have all A's. I want the all A nurse. And what's funny is a lot of the great nurses that I know who got C's in school actually conceptualize things a little bit better as opposed to just being like memorizing everything. You can't really retain things if you just memorize them once for a test and move on. The nurses that I know who got C's in nursing school or had to take their NCLEX more than once are really good nurses. And they tend to do a little bit better with the critical thinking and the skills that they hone. Whereas those with A's doesn't mean that they're not bad nurses. I know a lot of great nurses who have A's, but just don't get caught up in comparing your grades with other nurses. So with that all being said and out of the way, let's get into the tips. Tip number 1, first you gotta learn how you study best. By this I mean, do you learn by hands-on or kinesthetically? Do you learn via visual learning? So do you have to see something or have it illustrated to you or demonstrated to you so that way you get the idea? Are you somebody who's got to write it down, take notes? Or are you somebody who learns from reading a book a couple times? Or are you somebody who's an auditory learner, so you do better with like videos or listening to a lecture? So those are the different ways you might learn best. I am going to link a quiz in the description box below that tells you your learning styles and it gives you a percentage for each one that you are. So I'm something like 60% visual learner, I am 20% auditory, so I have to hear it, and then I'm 20% tactile, so I've got to touch it in order to do it. So a lot of times somebody would show me a skill and then I would do it, and that was how I learned best. Or they would show me a diagram of something since I'm visual, and then I would try to explain it back. Make sure you take that quiz, it's free. You guys are safe to use it, and hopefully that helps you figure out your learning style. Tip number 2, once you have your learning style, I do suggest that everybody use the teach back method, which means you learn the material, and even if you have to have it in front of you, you need to teach it back to someone. If you've talked to nursing students already, we love to use giant whiteboards, so I definitely suggest that you invest in a large whiteboard. I didn't get a whiteboard for myself personally. Then again, thankfully I was homeschooled, so my mom had an old whiteboard for me to use. But at school, there were certain classrooms that I had access to in study rooms, and even the library that we had a big whiteboard in it, so I would use those whiteboards. And for the most part, I would take one topic or subject, and I would just write everything I knew about it onto that whiteboard from my notes, and then I would read over it a couple times, get it all out in writing, and then I would usually take a buddy, and once I had written it, I would use the whiteboard and I would teach it back to my friends. So whether I was looking at the whiteboard or had my back to it, I always wrote it out first and then I would teach it to my friend, and that helped it stick better. And this is what we do as patients if you think about it. We are constantly educating our patients while they're in the hospital. Family members and patients themselves are constantly asking us questions. So this is actually a great way for you to learn how to be a teacher to your patient. Anyways, I find that to be super helpful, and almost every student that I knew that I went to class with used the teach back method. While I'm still on this little subtopic of how you learn best, I'm going to tell you guys how I studied personally, which is something you can implement, but you don't have to. And I kind of created my own little study habit, which was I had 3 times exposure to the material. So the first time I had exposure was I would listen to the lecture and I would take notes while I was listening to the lecture. And then the second exposure I had was I would rewrite my notes, so I wouldn't get super in depth while listening to the lecture, but I would use the PowerPoints that my instructor provided, plus my lecture notes, plus the book, and I would rewrite my notes. So if the professor was like, please refer to page 42 through 45 for the rest of this info, and then moved on, because it's like drinking out of a fire hose. They can't give you all the information. They give you the most pertinent and then have you read the rest. I would second rewrite all my notes in a way that I understood and in a way that incorporated lecture, PowerPoint, and book, whatever I thought was most pertinent. And then the third thing that I did was I would teach a friend, and sometimes I would even write my notes in a quiz form, so that way when my friends would come to quiz me based off my material, I already had questions written out that they could ask me, and that actually helped me remember some of them better. Or if you have a non-nursing friend that you still need help being quizzed on material. Sometimes my parents are like, I don't know what to ask you, if they were the only ones available to me. And that's when the questions would come in handy, because they might not know the material, but at least there are questions they could just ask me and then I would know from there. Okay, so the fourth tip that I have for you guys is to set timers. Whether you're ADHD or whether you're like me and you just have a short attention span sometimes, setting timers is a great way to gain a lot of information at once and then give yourself a break. I could not study for 2 to 3 hours straight. I would usually set a 30 to 45 minute timer, usually 30-minute, because my attention span is only 30 minutes. I would write, I would quiz, I would do everything that I could in 30 minutes with my phone turned off, in a room by myself or with my study partner, and with no distractions, or as little as possible. I would even have just instrumental music, because if I had music with lyrics, I would want to sing along and get distracted. So do your learning for 30 minutes and then set a 10 to 15 minute timer for a study break. So then pick up your phone, check social media, text that friend back, check emails, whatever you want to do, scroll through TikTok, and then set another 30-minute timer. Then do that for like 3 to 4 hours at a time, and then give yourself a good couple hour break. It's not good to study for hours and hours and hours on end, because a lot of times you stress yourself and you overload yourself. You need time for the initial information to sink in, which is also why you shouldn't cram study. My fifth tip is to go to bed early and wake up early. I don't know how else to stress this point. You've probably already heard it a dozen times. You've probably already heard from your teachers not to cram and stay awake super long. I do get it. I do get that there's people who are night owls and they study best at night. But do not stay up late before an exam that's early in the morning. So I learned the hard way during my freshman year of college. I was studying pharmacology and I had an A for a little while, and then it turned into a B or C. And I couldn't figure out what was going on. And it's because there was so much information in it that I felt overloaded half the time. And I would stay up very late hours and I would study all day long. And then I would want to sleep in on my days off. But I would just stay up really late and try to study and cram as much as I could. And then finally, I just kind of gave up because I was already not doing as well as I wanted to. I felt a little bit defeated. And I kind of gave up on studying extra, and so I just went ahead and I started going to bed early and started waking up early. And I noticed that when I just cut myself off, even if I didn't study all the material I had wanted to, when I cut myself off at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. was the latest I would go for studying, I would wake up the next morning and actually really honestly remember more. And then I started doing better on my exams. And this was like 3/4 of the way into the semester. And I still managed to pull off an A because I finally figured out the hard way that I had to go to bed early. So there was something about your brain just retains more when you give yourself the break and when you cut yourself off and when you try not to cram. And I'm not kidding, like seriously, go to bed early. I don't know how else to stress that other than I lived and learned it, so don't learn the hard way like I did. Even if you're stressing out about not knowing all the material, just go to bed. Go to bed and soak in what you've already learned so you don't lose that in the process of learning more information. And then in the morning, if you wake up early, you have time to skim through or go over with a friend, but retain what you've already learned, please. I don't even know what tip I'm on at this point. I think I'm on tip number 6. And my 6th tip is to do flashcards. This kind of goes in with your learning style and making like quiz questions for people, your study partners to help you with. But making flashcards helps. It helps with the memory building. It gives your study partner something to give you. And you can even use the same flashcards for your study partner. And when you quiz them, you're looking at it for like the 4th time and getting that in. And it helps you take in chunks at a time. Instead of just writing dozens and dozens of notes and reviewing the notes, it puts your hands on it and you have to flip through it and see it a couple times. And so something about that tactile stimulation helps stick it in your brain better. My 7th tip for studying is to color code subjects and new topics. They've done studies that show that you'll associate the color with the bits of information. So you've probably seen all over the place like my study materials or what's in my nursing school backpack and nursing school haul, and most of them are full of colored pens and colored highlighters. I don't care which one you use, but they are helpful. So make sure you color code things. This is a fun one that maybe not everybody's heard of, but actually chewing the same flavored gum when you study as when you take a test. So I would chew like a spearmint gum for when I studied, and then I would chew it again right before I took the test. One, it just seemed to help relieve some of my anxiety to have something to constantly chew on while I was taking a test. But for some reason, there was a memory association there too, between chewing the same flavored gum and when you took the test. It was similar to color coding subjects, but you see the same thing again or you taste the same thing again, and it just helps with association. Tip number 8, when you go to write down your notes, if something's clicking for you and you seem to remember it well or you just catch on to it well, don't write it down again. Don't even study it. That might sound weird, but if you already understand it and it clicks for you and you remember a good portion of it, there is no reason for you to revisit that. Instead, you should be studying the things that don't click for you and aren't sticking for you. I also realized that I did this for 8th tip. This meant 8. Now we're on the 9th tip. So my 9th tip is to make sure that you meet with your professors before tests, not just when you're doing poorly. I definitely recommend you meet with your professor if you're doing poorly on a test. You never know when they might show you grace or give you a bonus point. You just never know. I'm not guaranteeing that anybody's going to give you bonus points, but meeting with your professors always helps. I usually always got at least like, I don't know, I did at least 2 to 3% better on every following test if I had met with my professor beforehand. I always got like 1 extra question correct. So I definitely suggest that, but I also suggest it if you are not doing poorly on exams, or if it's your first exam for the semester, because then you can kind of feel out your professor a little bit, and you can also ask questions like, hey, what should I focus on the most? They're not always going to tell you. Everybody's different, but for the most part, professors going to actually like the fact that you're coming to them and be respectful of that and give you some pointers. The only thing I would say to be careful of is you may find out after your first test how accurate their pointers are for you, because I've gone to professors before and they're like, oh, I would say 40% of the test is going to be over this topic. And sure as heck, it was not. It had like maybe 3 questions out of 50 on that topic, and then the rest of it was a completely different topic. And sometimes that happens in class too. They'll just be like, hey, here's your study guide, and it says like 40% of the material on the test is going to be over a certain topic, and then it just isn't. It happens. You can ask just about anybody who's gone through nursing school. But on the off chance that it's correct, it's correct more times than it isn't correct, if that makes sense. So you can still get some pointers. You can still maybe narrow down what you're studying based off of what they tell you to focus on. And then after the first test, you'll know if it's accurate or not. But I still definitely recommend doing that. My 10th and final tip is to go to nursing.com. You guys have already heard me talk about this website, but it is super helpful. It's got it's got material for all the learning styles, which I think is great, and I wish that I had known about it in nursing school. It's got materials for if you're visual, so it's got videos for your skills. It's got flashcards so you can study NCLEX, and it's got written materials and cheat sheets and lots of colors in it, which I like. So it condenses things very nicely. And if you're just not getting a certain subject or topic and you've already met with your professor and you've already read the textbook and it's still not clicking, they still offer extra materials to help that click better. So I definitely recommend it. And you can even do practice questions on their mobile app while you're sitting somewhere, whether you're, waiting in an airport or at somebody's soccer game. It doesn't matter. They've got materials for you and you can take it with you on your phone. So I definitely recommend checking them out. They've got weekly cheat sheets that I'm always recommending you guys use, and they've got so many NCLEX prep materials for you too. So I definitely recommend it as a supplemental material for studying. And that's everything that I have for you guys. I hope that you found this helpful, and if I left out a study tip that you found helpful when you went through school, remember to leave it in the comments below. Give this video a thumbs up if it helped, and subscribe if you want to see more helpful content like this. Thank you guys for watching. Tutuanana. See you later.